stop. Don't just pick out any corned beef from the grocery store. There are some important things that you need to know to get the right one, and we're going to talk about those today. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Barbecue Tips Podcast. I'm your host, Christie Vanover, champion pitmaster, cookbook author, the girl behind one of America's top barbecue websites, girlscangrill.com, and a contestant on Food Network's Barbecue Brawl. I'm here to bring you some quick barbecue tips to help you up your barbecue game. St. Patrick's Day is almost here, and I thought about making this week's podcast all about how to make homemade pastrami, but by the time this drops, it will actually be too late for you to start the brining process in order to make it in time for St. Patrick's Day. Plus, I did a whole podcast on pastrami tips last year, so you can go listen to that video if you still want to learn how to make pastrami from scratch. And it's a fun podcast because I talk about basically my brine, my pickling spice, and my pastrami rub. And with all three of those, you can basically make pastrami out of any type of meat. So definitely go give that a listen if you want to go into the full long-form pastrami process. But today, because we're short on time and St. Patrick's Day is almost here, I'm going to talk to you about how to make pastrami out of corned beef that you can buy at the grocery store. So this time of year, you are going to find the pre-brined corned beef basically in every grocery store. And there are some really important things that I want you to think about and look at before you just grab one of those packages. First and foremost, it's almost always brisket. I've never seen any other type of corned beef at the grocery store besides brisket. And from all of the other things that I've taught you about brisket, there are two muscles that make up a brisket, the flat and the point. The flat is on the bottom, and that is the leaner piece. The point muscle is on top, and that is the fattier piece. So when you go to the grocery store and you look for your corned beef, make sure you pay attention to the packaging. One will say point, and one will say flat cut. So you have to decide which one of those cuts you prefer. The flat cut is really good for slices. The point cut is really good for sausage, burn ends, or even some pulled brisket or pulled pastrami if you want to go that route. So think about that. You can also go ahead and look at the price. The flat for me here in Las Vegas was $4.98 a pound, and the point cut was $3.98 a pound. That actually surprised me because the point cut is way more desirable in my mind because it has more flavor, more fat, just richer piece of meat. So I always like point cut over flat cut. So I'm surprised that the flat cut was more expensive. So it's kind of a win-win. You get $1 off per pound and you get a better flavor piece of meat if you go with the point cut. But I've got both here in front of me, and I'm going to talk to you about some different ways that you can prepare them. First and foremost, when you're at the grocery store, obviously you're going to decide whether you want the flat cut or the point cut, but I want you to turn over the packaging. It should be clear on the backside, so you should be able to see the meat inside of the bag itself. A brisket is a really large piece of meat, and these are cut down to about 3 to 4 pound pieces. So if you think about that, if you have like a 12, 16 pound brisket, the size and the piece or the section of the piece of the brisket that you're going to get can vary, which means what's inside the bag is going to vary. So some of the pieces in the bag might be kind of like floppy, a little thin on one end, kind of thicker on the other. Some might have more fat on them, although they do generally trim away most of the fat, but some will have that intermuscular fat that's still in there. So before you just grab a bag and get going, make sure that you do flip it over and take a look and see what kind of meat you're getting, especially if you're going with the flat and your goal is to have some nice even slices for like sandwiches. You want to make sure that you get a piece of meat that is pretty even in thickness and something that doesn't have like a big fat seam down the middle. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the piece that I got. It is very nice and even in the thickness like I mentioned, and the sides you can see are just nice and even. With the point, same kind of thing. I'm looking for evenness, and I'm looking for something that's just a solid piece of meat and not like a big clunk of fat that's in the middle, because some of the pieces in the bin actually didn't look so great, so I went with the pieces that looked better. Another thing you may notice when you are inspecting your meat is that there is pretty much no marbling in this brisket. That is one of the primary reasons that I like to make my own pastrami, because with that, I can control the meat that I'm starting with, and I can also control the amount of nitrites and the brine and that whole process. But with these, it is usually like select grade meat. When you look at this flat cut, there is like 0 white striation in here. It is just super lean meat. Even when I look at the point muscle, which usually does have a lot of fat woven into it, there's like none. It's just straight pink. It's just straight meat, which means it's going to be a little bit tougher. However, one thing that will help that is that this has been in a brine for who knows how long. And in matter of fact, this actually says use by June. It is March right now and it says use by June. So that means that this can stay in this brine for another few months. So I don't even know how long it's already been in a brine, but basically with all of that salt, it's going to be tenderizing the meat the entire time. So the fact that it's a select grade shouldn't be as big of a problem with a brine that is this long. But if you are doing your own pastrami, I recommend like a 5 to 7 day brine on a beef brisket, and I like to use prime brisket. Choice if I have to, but I really like prime grade brisket just because I like the flavor and the richness of it. And you can do a faster brine with that because it's already a beautiful tender piece of meat. But when you've got select grade like this, a long brine is going to help it out. When it comes to the brine in this packaging, I don't really know exactly what's in it because it's just kind of general. It has water, it has different types of sodium, including the sodium nitrite. That is the pink curing salt that's going to turn it pink once you smoke it. And then it also has spices, which you can tell by flipping it over that it's pretty much pickling spices. You can see some bay leaves, peppercorns, mustard seeds, things along those lines. So pretty standard flavor profile. However, because it has been in this brine for, again, God knows how long, and because I don't really know the salt levels compared to what I do myself when I make my own, I definitely like to rinse this off with cold water after I take it out of the packaging. And if you really want to cut the salt, you can even soak it in some cold water. You can just do 30 minutes to an hour, or if you really, really want to soak it from all that excess salt, you can soak it in cold water and put it in the refrigerator, and that will help draw out some of that salt. It will still be very, very flavorful, just not quite as salty as if you just took it straight out of the package and threw it straight on the smoker. When it comes time to season your corned beef, do not add salt. I know with a normal brisket, you would do like kosher salt, black pepper, and probably garlic powder, like an SPG, or you might even use my brisket rub, which does have salt in it. I would not use that on this because it's been sitting in salt all this time. You don't want to add more salt flavor. So instead, I have a pastrami rub recipe on my website, which I will include a link in the show notes so that you guys can see. It's a really flavorful recipe for pastrami that brings out all of those beautiful like pickling spice flavors with no added salt. So that's what I like to rub on this. So after I rinse it or soak it in water, pat it dry, put that dry rub on it. Now, if I'm making my brisket from scratch, making my pastrami from scratch, I will then let it sit in the refrigerator uncovered overnight. That lets the flavors really infuse into the meat even more and does like a dry brine. When I buy a packaged corned beef, I don't really need to do that because, again, it's been already brining so long, it's packed with flavor. Really, I'm just creating a crust when I add that pastrami rub. Now, the packaging on these talk about how to make corned beef, which is actually usually steaming or boiling, or you could even put it in a slow cooker. That's corned beef. The difference between corned beef and pastrami is that pastrami is smoked. So that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. We're not going to boil this. We're going to take this out to the smoker. You want to set your smoker anywhere from 225 to 275. Usually, I would say for a choice grade cut or below, I would stick to the 225 range, but because this has been brined, it has been tenderized, so it's okay to go to the 275 mark if you don't have as much time on your hands and you just want to get it smoked. So I usually go like 250 to 275. Just put it on the smoker and smoke it just like you would a brisket. You can spritz it every now and then. You can put a water pan in your smoker if you like to, especially if you live in a dry climate like I do. And then once you like the bark on it, once it reaches about 160 to 170 degrees internal temperature, then I like to wrap it. And when I wrap it, I usually put more spritz. And when it comes to the spritz, I like to use beer, especially like a stout, like a Guinness. It just goes really well with the flavors of the corned beef. So that's a really good spritz. Otherwise, water, apple cider vinegar, whatever your favorite spritz is for your brisket. When you do wrap it up, go ahead and wrap it in either foil or butcher paper. Add some more spritz in there. You could throw some beef tallow in there. You could throw some butter in there. Totally your call. Wrap it up, put it back on your smoker, and continue cooking it to an internal temperature of anywhere from 205 to 210. One thing you can do to monitor your temperature is to use that new ThermoWorks RFX. It's a wireless meat thermometer. You just stick it in there and you leave it in there, and then it'll tell you on your phone when your meat is done. I usually like to set my temperature range like 10 degrees prior to it being done. That way I have enough notice so I can get everything ready in the house, get my cooler ready, get all that stuff ready before I pull it off the smoker. The wireless ThermoWorks is legit. I will leave a link to that in my show notes. If you guys do decide to buy one, thank you so much. I do get a small commission at no extra cost to you. It's just a great way that you guys can show that you're supporting Girls Can Grill and all the great barbecue tips information that I love sharing with you guys. Once your brisket reaches the proper internal temperature, all you're going to do then is the same thing you would with a regular brisket. Wrap it in a towel, throw it in a cooler without ice, and let it rest for a couple of hours just so that the juices like kind of settle. And then you can unwrap it all, slice it up, and serve it. You know, it's great with rye bread, with some Swiss cheese, with some Thousand Island dressing. It makes great sandwiches. So this is a great shortcut way to do pastrami if you didn't do the whole brining process. There are two other tips that I have for you though that you can do for a shortcut for brisket. And specifically, I like to use the point cut when I'm doing these two things. One of them is my corned beef burn ends, or technically pastrami burn ends because they're smoked, they're not steamed. But when I do my pastrami burn ends, I'm basically cooking the brisket just like I talked about in the first part. But when it comes time for the wrap stage, that's when you will cut your brisket point into cubes, like 1 inch or 1.5 inch size cubes, and then go ahead and put them in an aluminum half pan and then add in your butter. You can add in some more of that beer, and then you're going to cover them and let them continue to cook until they get tender. Then once they start to get tender, you can add a glaze. Instead of a barbecue sauce, which you would usually do with a traditional Kansas City style burn end, we're going to do a stout glaze, which is basically like stout, Worcestershire sauce, a lot of brown sugar to just like tack it up and make it sticky and sweet. I've got the full recipe on my website, but you will remove the foil, you will add that beautiful stout glaze, and then you'll let it continue to cook until they're all the way cooked through and they're nice and tacky. And it's just a really fun, unique twist on St. Patrick's Day by making burnt ends out of corned beef. Pastrami burnt ends. You guys got to try it. The next thing you can do with the point cut is make pastrami sausage. It's really not as hard as it sounds. You basically just take this point cut and you run it through your meat grinder. I have both a KitchenAid and a more commercial model. If I'm doing a lot of sausage, I'll pull out the commercial model. If I'm doing just a quick batch of something like this that's 4 pounds, I would probably just use the KitchenAid. When you're dicing this into cubes, take a look at how much fat is actually included in this point cut. The one I have here today is pretty lean, so to me, I need to add some more fat to it so that my sausage would be juicier. So the easiest thing to do is honestly to just throw some bacon through the grinder because bacon is mostly fat. If you happen to have beef fat in the freezer, which I do because I cook up a lot of briskets for competitions, then you can throw that in. But if you don't have beef fat in the fridge, I totally get it because you're not as crazy as I am probably. So just go out and get yourself some bacon and throw that through the grinder, and that will give you a good fat content. So it just gives you a good ratio of the lean meat to the fat meat so that it's a little bit juicier. But once you dice it up, you're going to want to put it in the freezer for like 30 minutes. The key to making really juicy sausage that snaps is keeping your meat as cold as possible. And we're going to be handling it a lot through the process of making sausage, so you've got to make sure that you chill it between each step. So again, cut it into cubes, throw it in the freezer. While it's in the freezer, get your grinder all set up. Once the 30 minutes are up, go ahead and grab it, push it through the grinder, grind your meat, and then stir in some beer and massage that with your hands until it's just mixed through, and then go ahead and put it in the freezer again. You want it to get nice and cold before the next step. Next, you are going to actually case your sausage. So I just get my sausage casings online on Amazon. I'll throw a link in the show notes for that as well. You're going to want to rinse those out because they are like preserved in salt. I rinse them a lot. I run water through them completely. And then you'll take one of the long casings and you will put that onto your sausage stuffer. So yes, you are going to need a sausage stuffer and a meat grinder to make this, but I think those are really cool investments that you guys should consider if you plan to make sausage on a regular basis. But you will add that casing onto your meat stuffer, and then you will put all of your ground meat into the like stuffer compartment. It depends on how your stuffer works. If it's the KitchenAid, you'll just need to turn it on just slowly until the meat comes all the way to the end of the tube. If you have one that's like a manual crank, then you'll just want to turn the crank a little bit until the meat comes to the end of the tube. Once it gets there, then you can tie that casing into a knot. And the reason that you want to push it through first and get the meat right there is because you don't want to get any air into your sausage casing. I'll probably do a whole different episode on sausage making in the future, so stay tuned for that. But once you get your sausage there, you tie the knot, then you can just continue cranking and letting the meat roll through and fill up the sausage casings. You're going to give them a twist and turn until you make your sausage links, and then once it's all done, you'll tie it in a knot on the other end. Then I like to pierce the casing with like a toothpick just to get out any air pockets, and then again, you need to chill it some more. Once it is chilled, then you can cut those into individual links, and then you can throw it on your smoker, or you can even grill it. So you can cook it hot and fast like you would like a bratwurst, or you can smoke it slow and low like a smoked sausage. And then you either have grilled pastrami sausages or smoked pastrami sausages. One more corned beef shortcut that I've got for you, and that is pastrami meatballs. This one is pretty easy, a lot easier than the sausage. You will dice this up into cubes, throw it in the freezer, get your sausage grinder ready. After 30 minutes, go ahead and run it through the grinder, and then you're going to chill it some more while you make the rest of the ingredients. You're just going to mix some milk and some panko and then seasonings if you want, but honestly, I don't feel like it needs any seasonings because it's already so flavorful. And then you're just going to roll those up into balls. I like to chill them one more time while I get the grill ready, and then you can either grill them or smoke them, and ta-da, you have got some pastrami meatballs. So easy. You can serve them again with that Guinness stout that I talked about earlier with the burnt ends. You can serve them with Thousand Island dressing, or you can just serve them plain and just have a really fun appetizer for St. Patrick's Day. So there you go, guys. Some quick barbecue tips for what you can do with pre-brined corned beef brisket. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you enjoy these tips, I would really appreciate it if you hit that like, follow, subscribe button. Leave a comment for me. Let me know what your thoughts are on all of these different ideas. As always, you can find thousands of barbecue tips and hundreds of barbecue recipes at girlscangrill.com, and you can always follow me on all the socials at Girls Can Grill. Until next time, guys, happy St. Patrick's Day and happy grilling.